Welcome to True Health Live, your favorite public health podcast. We are live on YouTube, Facebook, and audio on your favorite podcast platforms. If you're interested in public health, then this is the space for you. Okay, so we're recording. So, welcome to another episode of True Health Live, where we explore the diverse and often overlooked aspects of health and wellness. I am your host, Yafe, also known as Rita Louise, and today we have a fascinating topic to delve into: medical intuition. Now, from what I was able to gather, medical intuition is a practice that combines intuitive insight with health and wellness, offering a unique and not often used approach to understanding and addressing health issues. So, unlike our allopathic or conventional medicine or traditional medicine, which relies heavily on physical tests and diagnostics, medical intuition seeks to include and identify energetic and emotional causes of physical symptoms. Our guest today is Dr. Rita Louise, a doctor of naturopathic medicine by training, and she's also a practitioner in the field of medical intuition. Dr. Louise has dedicated her career to uncovering deeper, often hidden causes of physical and emotional ailments through her unique blend of intuitive insight and holistic practices. So today, we're going to explore what medical intuition is, how it works, and how it's growing and how it's being used in the world of holistic health. So, Dr. Louise, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. So, could you start by sharing a little bit about your journey and how you came to specialize in this unique field?
Sure thing. So, excuse me. Growing up, we were required to read a book every 2 weeks in order to get our allowance. And I was really not interested in like Nancy Drew or, any young adult type reading. I was fascinated by archaeology and anthropology.
Okay.
And then there were these TV shows. One was The Amazing Kreskin, and the other one was a series called The Sixth Sense, which wasn't the movie, but a series featuring Gary Collins, who is a college professor who had ESP also. And I just became fascinated with the concept of intuition and just started studying and studying and studying and studying. And what I learned was that if you became enlightened, then you would have this intuitive gift as part of being enlightened, which I never could figure out. So then I ended up studying at the Berkeley Psychic Institute and graduated from them and discovered that I had been very psychic, very intuitive my whole life, but no one ever connected the dots for me, which led me into this. I mean, I left my day job. I've been doing this work full time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started my practice, one of the things that I found that came very easily to me, when you do intuitive work, many people have the belief that, well, you're intuitive, so you should be able to talk to dead people. You should be able to predict the future. You should be able to do all of these things.
Yeah.
And what I found is that, somebody might be really good about talking about relationships, or they might be really good about talking to dead people, which I don't do. And what I found in working with people was that I was always finding their health issues, which was really weird. And none of the people I went to school with ever really noticed it or
Mm-hmm.
saw it, which drove me to go back to school, because you're talking to someone and you see this anomaly in their back and you're going, I think that's your kidney. I'm not really sure, but I think that's your kidney. And you can't really provide any insight because there's not any brain matter
Mm-hmm.
to to work off of. So it drove me back to school. I got my degree as a naturopath and then a PhD in natural health counseling with a focus on how our thoughts and emotions affect our health.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting because our thoughts and emotions are not always things that can be seen, like, right, sometimes they're just inside, yet there's truth to, or it is true that whatever is happening on the internal, it's always going to exhibit on the external. So I I totally get that. You mentioned like looking and correct me if I'm wrong, but I understood like maybe seeing something on someone's back and being like, oh, that's your kidney. So how much of that, or how much of like phrenology, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and how much of phrenology is kind of part of that? You know, like the practice of like different parts of your body being connected to different organs, right? Because there's some people who are very much in tune with that. So can you kind of maybe explain a little bit of that for some people who might be like, well, how do you connect the back to the kidney and da 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 da? Like, so
Well, the kidneys are sit in our back. They
they
sit
are.
right back here. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you're doing intuitive work, especially health related, it's not like, the person has their shirt off and I'm looking at their physical back. They're
Mm-hmm.
in their chair and I'm in my chair and I have my eyes closed and in my mind's eye, because I'm very visual and there are different channels that it comes in on, but I'm very visual. And so I'm looking at her and I, I just see this like massive black gray something
Mm.
in her back, sitting right
Okay.
in here. And it was
Okay.
like, but I didn't know because I had no anatomy and physiology background.
Got it. I see. Okay. So it was more like, well, I think it's your kidney. Like
I think
based
it's
on
the
like what we
kidney.
know about like where things are located, I think it might be this. Well, then I guess I'll change my question. Like, is there any part of phrenology that you do incorporate into your practice?
Okay, so I don't even know what that word is, to be honest.
So the study of like, when you have like different parts of your hands or your feet, and they're connected to different parts of your organs. Some of it, I don't know, some of it
So
might.
like reflexology kind of thing.
Yeah, right. Like
Okay,
I think the phrenology might be like the
in the
in the head, right? And then the reflexology here, like so some people have said like I actually do this when you get a headache, like to rub your palms or things like that.
hmm and so I have to think here a second. In the Eastern tradition, they talk about things like chakras, which are energy centers in the body. Or in acupuncture, we have acupuncture points, and there are these series of channels that run through the body, kind of
Mm-hmm.
like our blood vessels, And so when you're rubbing that spot on your hand, you're actually activating a meridian that is connected to the head. Or I'm not a meridian expert. Or actually, I think that one is connected to heart,
Okay.
and so you're stimulating circulation, which
Mm-hmm.
will help clear a headache.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the same thing with reflexology, there are those connections that are in your feet that parallel or connect to the different organs. And so by stimulating them, you can offer relief and movement to those organs,
Mm-hmm.
because what's going on in your feet is usually reflective of what's going on in your physical body.
Right. Yeah. So that's a good point. Like a point that you make on your website is that like your that medical intuition can reveal like the root causes of physical symptoms. So how does this approach complement your holistic health practices or holistic health practices in general? That we that we usually discuss here. So like a lot of things that we discuss are, mental health disorders or sexual and reproductive health, the occurrence of like bumps under the skin. Like those are some of the things we just talked about this season.
Mhm.
What are some other things we talk about a lot? But that's just to name a few, and any others that you want to add.
So when we experience, and I'm going to say disease, and I'm using that in a very global term, but anything that is going on in the physical body,
Mm-hmm.
over 80%, more like 90% occurs because there's something going on inside of our body that has been festering for years and is finally manifested into our physical body.
Right.
So if we break an arm, that's not part of that category. We get a virus, not part of that category. But if we get high blood pressure or diabetes or cancer or any of those other ailments, there's usually something that's going on in the body long before it
Mm-hmm.
actually shows up on a physical level. And I can go into this whole Eastern scientific explanation about it, which I'll save everybody from. But
Well, I don't know. I don't know if they'll get a
but
good.
no, I'm going to give the Cliff Note part.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, but how that appears inside of us is that we have limiting beliefs, we have negative thinking, we have emotions that are out of control. And when we go to the doctor, they're like, oh, well, stress plays a role in it. And so my stress is different from your stress.
Right.
And there's the stress like I have a crappy job and I'm working too much and I got 15 kids and that's one kind of stress. But another kind of stress, and this is usually like the root cause kind of stuff, is I feel invisible.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody can hear me.
Mm-hmm.
I try so hard, but I'm not getting anywhere.
Mm.
Those deep inner naggings that are with you 24/7. And what hurt, where my hurt is, where my deeply seated pain
Mm.
is kind of what you base your life around.
Yeah.
Because usually they come from childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I have a lot of people that are like, oh, well, 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, I'm not talking 2 weeks ago. I'm talking, let's talk 20 years ago. Let's talk when you were 6 years old kind of time frame. Because usually the seed of whatever that is gets planted when we're a little kid. And now we notice every time we're being ignored, we notice it. And as we get older, for whatever reason, we kind of create situations where we get to see that again, or our focus is we're looking for somebody to ignore us.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets validated, and so it gets validated and validated and validated, and it becomes deeper and bigger inside of us until it finally manifests as a thyroid disorder.
Mm-hmm. Got it. You said something that made me think of when you said like for whatever reason, like when we grow older, we look. I'm paraphrasing here. It's kind of like we look for the situations to repeat what happened, and immediately I thought like, so is that some kind of deep seated need to like stay like in victimhood, which would then kind of put you in that state of stress, right? Then that then creates or manifests any number of things that could happen because of that.
Exactly. Exactly. But it's interesting because different things will turn up in the body in kind of specific areas.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're a person that has a lot of anger,
Mm-hmm.
and or a lot of frustration, and we that's our life. Many times they'll manifest a liver issue, or if they're afraid to communicate or they feel invisible, because when you feel invisible, you don't talk because you're invisible. They'll manifest something in their throat, or if they have experienced a lot of personal pain and have a lot of grief, they might manifest a heart related issue. So it's interesting because that trauma will actually sit in different places in the body.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And I'm going to throw out this little piece because I've
Uh-huh.
worked with so many people over the years, and I'll make some comment because they come to me and they have a complaint about a gallbladder issue. I don't know,
Yeah.
and I'm poking around on them, and I'll make some comment to them, like about some old relationship that they had when they were 20 years old and they're 60 now.
Yeah.
That they couldn't let the person go or something, whatever the thing was.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll look at me and go, but I'm over that. And I'll look at them and
Are
say, but you're not, because if you were over it, I
you?
wouldn't find the trauma in your body.
Right. Interesting. Interesting how we, so it's kind of like we can fool ourselves to like say like what like your client said like, well, I'm over it, but the body is telling the truth.
Mhm.
The body always tells the truth. Body never lies. So
Body never lies.
body never lies. can say out of our mouth and even like fool ourselves into thinking, the body's like, well, I'm gonna show you what's really happening, in a year or two, maybe 10 or 20.
I mean, usually it's a long time,
Mhm. Yeah. So your journey into medical intuition, like, so your background seems to be really diverse. So spanning from naturopathy to also the spiritual counseling part. So can you share a little bit about how that, because you said you went back to school, like share a little bit about how that led you to specialize in the medical intuition. Like, so rather than like, okay, well, I'm just going to be a naturopath, but you really push like, this is what I do. Like, yes, the way I'm reading is like, yes, I'm a naturopath, but what I am, my profession is medical intuition. So can you kind of give a little bit on that?
So this is going to sound terrible. Okay, so, and maybe a little big headed, but I actually am very good at what I do. And I trip people out because I'll just sit there and be like, oh, okay, but you're carrying this loneliness around like in your leg in this one spot because I
Yeah.
do medium work. It's like, you're afraid to move forward because you're just feeling really lonely and blah, blah, blah. And they just look at me like, how did you get that? I mean, it just comes to me very naturally, very naturally.
Yeah.
So the naturopath part was just kind of to fill in a big hole that I had. And to
Mm-hmm.
be really honest with you, naturopaths are kind of like chiropractors and regular doctors. You see people all the time, every day, one after another. And I could never do that.
You wanted something different. Speaking of which, because and we kind of briefly touched on this before we started. What is the scene like? What where are the medical intuitives? Like, so how is that looking? Like, where can people find them? Like, do you collaborate with your traditional clinical doctors, or do you mainly kind of stay in the holistic health field?
So medical intuition, usually you end up having a private practice.
Okay.
Mainstream medicine really doesn't want to touch you.
Mm,
Many holistic doctors, like functional medicine doctors or
yeah.
whatever, don't really want to touch you. And
Okay.
and I'm just speaking my truth. It's because medical intuitives don't do functional testing. Medical intuitives don't send people home with a big pile of medication. They in its truest sense of the word, a medical intuitive, like I'm a trained naturopath, and so I feel very comfortable in making recommendations to people to start them on their journey. But a traditional medical intuitive is really kind of a diagnostic tool. Their job is to look at and assess what's going on. That
Mm-hmm.
really is their purpose. And you can kind of cut into these more traditional people's bottom line by offering this service. I mean, I had one client who was in traditional therapy for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
She was working with me once a month, and she was coming in and she said, looked at me after our third session. She said, I've been going to traditional therapy for 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
and it took my therapist 10 years to get to where you got to me in 3 sessions.
Mm. I hadn't thought about that, but that could be a whole other show. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stay the course. Um, but you mentioned something about like the functional testing, right? So that being said, do most of your clients or clients who do utilize medical intuitives, do you either suggest or prefer, whatever it is, like that there might be and I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, I'm just wanting to know, like, a kind of a dual kind of track, like where they work with you, but maybe if they're kind of like on the fence, they also do have like their traditional conventional you know process.
Mm-hmm. So there are certain things that are, I'm going to say, challenging for me to assess.
Yeah.
Like hormones, female hormones. Oh my God. Just
Mm-hmm.
there's just too many of them. And and any because people will come with like female hormone problems, or they'll come with
Yeah.
adrenal burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some herbs, like there's an adrenal glandular, which is basically parts of bovine cow adrenals that you ingest to support your adrenals. But to me, they're very strong. And I only recommend them when someone is like in really bad shape and they need that level of support. And so I'll usually recommend to them, go get a blood test, find out where your levels are, because I don't want to make a recommendation and mess up your body by giving you something like that, and now your body becomes dependent on it, and then you have to
Right.
withdraw from it. But
Yeah.
when I'm working with people, I have like a scale. Like I talk to you about something and I get like, it is, you have a sore throat.
Mm-hmm.
It'll clear up in a couple of days.
Right. Right.
But then I'll get like, okay, this is what I see going on. It's like, it's on my radar. I'm not feeling like you need to do anything about it today, but I am mentioning it because I am seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, their blood sugar is,
Pre-diabetic.
but not necessarily showing up in their blood work that way.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But from my perspective, because I can't see things that are preclinical,
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a little warning, like, okay, maybe start paying attention to your diet so
Mm-hmm.
that you don't keep moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Then I get warnings like, okay, this is going on. You need to pay attention to it. You're not going to die tomorrow, but but you need to put your energy on it. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'll get warnings where it's like, hon, you need to go to the doctor, like,
Yeah.
now.
Okay. So is there like, well, I guess for your practice, like, do you find being able to use maybe the results of functional testing, whether, be a serum blood draw or, scan results, like helpful,
I
for
do find it helpful. I do
okay.
find it very helpful. I mean, because I have people that, I have clients that don't trust traditional doctors and will come to me first. And if I tell them, hey, you should go get this checked out, like, it's not terrible, but you should go get it checked out, they'll listen to me. Uh,
Right. Right.
but then I have other people that they've gone to the doctor and, they want to remove a body part and they're and they're not digging it, and they want to find some, they want a second opinion.
Mm-hmm.
They want to find out if there's something natural or alternative that they can do. And
Right.
be realistic with them. It's like, if I feel you have a window of, let's say, 6 months to start to turn things around, because when you work with natural remedies, it takes time. It's not like taking a medication. It
Mm-hmm.
takes time for the body to unwind.
Right.
And you have to be serious about it, because I have a
Yeah.
lot of people that are like, oh, well, I want to do the natural thing, but then they won't take the supplements and they
Mm.
won't exercise and they won't do what I recommend to them.
Right.
People that should just go to the doctor and get the pill.
Looking for a fun, active way to connect with other women in the Raleigh Durham area? Join the Anu Women's Bike Club. Whether you're an experienced rider or just getting started, we ride together to explore local communities, promote health, and build sisterhood. Our rides are supportive, social, and perfect for women and girls of all skill levels. So what are you waiting for? Hop on, join the fun, and let's ride together.
You
It's
know,
interesting. Yeah. It's like I do the natural thing, but I'm still looking for the quick fix.
exactly. Or they're just not interested in putting in the work.
Putting in the work. Yeah. Like, yeah, because we've gotten so used to things like painkillers, for example, like they work pretty quickly. But if you're going to take a supplement, as you said, or an herb, the body has to take time to metabolize. Like you may not see results. You might need like anywhere from like a few weeks to a few months for you to actually see some sort of change. Um,
Very good.
you
Very
you you
good.
you mentioned some, well, because I also do like I do a combination of conventional but also like more natural, you know Oh, hello. You mentioned something and it made me think about your, the other services that you offer, like the energy healing and the past life readings. Like, how do all those different modalities intersect with your work in medical intuition?
So, I mean, the past life readings, not so much.
Mhm.
My I do past life readings more on an entertainment basis. Every so often, I have had, and we're talking every so often, a client whose issue actually did come from a past life.
Mhm.
Is when I'm working with someone, I'm looking for the trauma. You're manifesting something, you didn't fall off a hill, so you didn't break something. And so there is something inside of you going on. And I'm looking and looking and looking, and I'm following a timeline back, 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 back. And now I'm at birth, and now I'm inter-utero, and I'm still not finding the nugget because I'm always looking for that core,
Mhm.
and that's as far as I'll go. And I'll recommend to them that they work with like a hypnotherapist that does past life regression, too,
Mhm.
because I don't do that. And it used to be, it used to be that everybody blamed all of their life concerns, their health concerns, the way their life went based on their past lives. And
Right.
my philosophy is, you already got enough stuff in this life to worry about and to
Mhm.
deal with. So let's just focus on this one. And
Mhm.
if I'm led that we need to address a past life, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But as far as the energy medicine, and so in Eastern philosophy, there is the science, that we're filled with a life force energy, chi, and energy medicine works to get the movement of that subtle energy happening within us. Because when we experience disease, it's often because that movement of subtle energy becomes stagnated. So, as an example, we were talking about the little beliefs that we have that maybe we got 20 years ago. Well, that belief creates a little whirlpool eddy inside of our space. So maybe it's sitting inside of our gallbladder. And every
Mhm.
time it gets activated by some other situation, that eddy gets a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And so energy medicine helps to clear and straighten, that's a word,
Mhm.
the movement of energy through the body. I found it works really good to work with people that have experienced trauma,
Mhm.
that have issues with emotional regulation. It works wonderfully. Um, and many times when I'm doing that kind of work with someone, I'll also give them some energy medicine tools that they can use for themselves so that they can practice on their own. And I'm just kind of the facilitator and going, okay, well, it's stuck here, so let's try doing this. Because the healing, doing energy medicine on yourself, taking a moment to meditate, taking a moment to pay attention to your thoughts. It's just like taking a supplement, except
Yeah.
invisible.
It is. And that we definitely discussed like yoga and meditation on the show before. Can you, for those who may not be, who are more familiar with like physical health, right? Can you give a little explanation on how you work with energy and it playing a role in overall well-being?
Okay. I mean, that's kind of a hard one. But, everybody, I'm going to frame it this way. Everybody has done energy medicine at one point in time of in their lives, whether
Mm-hmm.
they recognize it or not. So you're walking through the living room and you bang your knee on the coffee table. What's the first thing that you do? You go, you take your hands, you put them on your knee, and you send it soothing thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And really, that is kind of the basis of energy medicine.
Mm-hmm.
When you were a little kid and you hurt yourself and you went to your mom and she rubbed your boo boo and she gave it that little kiss, and it always felt better because mom
Hmm.
was doing energy medicine.
Right, right. So what about that I don't know if, what kind of medicine or what kind of practices be like one pain cancels out another. So like maybe you hit your knee or you stub your toe and then you pinch yourself to take your mind off of pain. Like what is that?
Not anything I practice. How's that?
I've done that. It kind of works. It kind of works. Take your
You
mind
know,
off the
I
little.
mean, I really advocate a similar kind of philosophy when talking about dealing with negative thinking, you know,
Mm-hmm.
dealing with, well, negative thinking or negative thinking, where, you just start paying attention to the thoughts that are coming in. And if it's a negative thought, replacing the negative thought, they tell you, use a happy thought. And when I first started that practice, I had none. And I kind of still don't really have good ones to use, but I had none. They were always pretty tragic. And,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I found that if I caught myself in a negative thought, I could just stop and breathe,
Mm-hmm.
stop
Yeah.
and do some tapping, or I
Right.
could stop and get up and walk around. I mean, I had a whole menu of things I could do
Mm-hmm.
to intercept that thought process
Mm-hmm.
and get out of the negative thinking.
Yeah. So you mentioned something. I had a question, but you mentioned something for those who don't know what tapping is. I personally have had maybe two experiences where we did tapping or someone was discussing it, but can you give a definition or explanation of explain what tapping is?
Sure. So tapping, I mean, there's history that I don't have life specifics, but tapping is basically where you tap on various points on your body, so like here, 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 here. There are 9 points that you can tap, and they are connected to different meridians. So we've already talked about the different acupuncture meridians. And so these tapping points are connected to your different acupuncture meridians. So, like this one here is connected to your stomach, and this one here is connected to your gallbladder.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they get activated, it energizes it and it kind of vibrates it and helps it shake off anything that is unwanted from it. And
Right.
so that's part of the part thing about tapping. What I love about tapping
Mm-hmm.
is it can be very meditative, but
Yeah.
you have something to do because
Mm-hmm.
many Americans say they can't meditate, and they need a more active kind of meditation. And I
Mm-hmm.
find tapping to be kind of on the borderline of
Yeah.
both, because
Very soothing.
you're sitting and you're breathing, but you're tapping and you're counting. And so, and it's the counting part and, paying attention to
Mm-hmm.
that takes your mind off the negative thought and gives your body or whatever is going on, and it gives your body the opportunity to let go of all of that extraneous stuff that it might be holding on to.
Yeah, yeah. It can be, and some people like, whether it be because we know we talk about not we, but there's the spectrum, right? And so some people are considered like diagnosed when diagnosed, like they're on the spectrum, and some of the behaviors sometimes exhibited can be like it is actually like a form of tapping that some people actually do, and I think like when we actually tap in, I guess pun intended, like to those things, we can see how soothing they actually are, and maybe come to some understanding as to why a person might do that. I don't know if the word is involuntarily, but if we're thinking about people who might be on the spectrum, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, my next question was about it was in alignment with like the energy and the spiritual health, like so like how do you see the connection between a person's spiritual health, like because I think that energy and spirituality, they're very connected, so that connection between the spiritual health and the physical health.
Okay. I know I got an answer for you. So we are we are, and I'm going to say spiritually aligned, and so I'm going to go a little religiousy here, but when we are in connection with source, God, the universe, whatever word you want to put there, it's
Mm-hmm.
like we typically experience radiant health because our energy is moving and we are connected. And
Mm-hmm.
as we as human beings start to get caught up in our own ego and in our own problems and become a woe is me kind of person, it takes us away from that alignment. It
Right.
takes us away from that connection, but it also facilitates disease.
Yeah, it goes back to the when you talked about like the meditation. I think you said just now, like even meditative state. Like in my faith and culture, like meditation is also another way to speak to the Most High. And
Mhm.
we're told for those who do follow a certain path or follow the path, it is when you're knocked off of that is because you're so preoccupied with the world and all the other things. Whether it be like guilt or shame. And if you're not kind of focused on what you should be doing, what our purpose is, right? Or even if you are um, kind of just focused on like wanting to like get, it keeps you kind of separated from a more healthy or even what might be your natural state of being. Like you're not on your path, you're not on purpose, so you're misaligned, so then all those health problems will show up.
Exactly. And I'm a very spiritual person. I'm not particularly a religious person.
Mhm.
But I released a book this past year. So, shameless plug,
No,
called
go ahead.
Dang.
I
Dang, it was me all along. And it really talks about this process of finding happiness through mindful awareness.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I discovered in researching this book, I mean, because it was really my journey that I was researching, but I'm a consummate researcher, and so I take notes, and it turns into a book. But one of the things that I came to find out is that when you look at books about mental health, it's like they have books about every aberration of negative, mental, toxic, whatever. That
Mhm.
you can be a narcissist, you can be a codependent, you can have this, you can have that. But when you sit there and you look for information about how do you have joy in your life? How do you find happiness? And things that are higher vibrating, better feeling emotions, they're mute. They are mute. And the only place you can find that information is by starting to look at spiritual sources, by looking at Eastern tradition type material,
Mhm.
um, and not there is no scientific literature, which is probably why medical intuition is kind of fringy because it relies more on what can we do to give you that higher vibrating energy and get
Mhm.
you out of that negative.
Right.
So, but I mean, I knew this, but now I know it, if that makes sense, is
Mhm.
that we cannot be happy. We cannot find joy in our life. We cannot have the life be content in our lives unless we have that connection with source.
Mm.
Period.
That's it, right? You have to have that connection with source. And as I was saying, like in my faith and culture, which we call ourselves the Anu. And one of the things or three things, it's like, to like kind of take a step back. Should you be feeling that way? What does the book, what does the Bible, what, or even Torah, like what does it tell us about how you should be feeling if that feeling comes up? Like turn to the book to find out how to move through that. We like literally there was our House of Yuya podcast, like they did a segment on like envy and strife and like division, and the one of the no the solution that came up was rather than sitting in, whether you're envious of some, another person, because that also kind of shows up, that manifests in some physical manner as well. you know Maybe turn it inward to what you do have to be joyous about, you know because then if you're focused on like what you do have and how you can be joyous, or rejoice in the fact that you're different from the other person, and that's a good thing, then you won't kind of focus on those emotions, those negative emotions and feelings and thoughts that can then turn into some sort of disease or illness.
I mean, there are so many people that only see the cup half empty
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
versus the cup half full.
Cool.
I'm just going to share a quick story.
Yeah.
So I came from a family of very negative thinkers. I'm half Jewish. And Jewish people, they kvetch. They complain about freaking everything. So I came by it very naturally. And I remember this story so vividly. So my mom and dad went to a wedding. And so I'm asking my dad, so how was the wedding? And it was for his best friend's son who got married. It's like they had a four-piece string quartet playing while they ate dinner. Then they had a band. They had lobster new thermidor for dinner. And so he's telling me these little details, and I'm like, so how was the wedding? He goes, the food was cold. And that was his takeaway from the wedding, was the food was cold. And I'm like, but they had a string quartet and a
Yeah.
live band. It wasn't a DJ. I mean, I'm like, wow, that sounds like it was pretty good.
And truth be told, like some like yeah, I mean, if you eating seafood, right? Like, but um in the days where I used to eat seafood, some seafood is served chilled. Like, so was it like, oh, it's cold, or was it just like the chilled kind and it wasn't, not that it matters, but just a
Well, I mean, I think I don't think I've ever eaten lobster thermidor, but I think lobster thermidor is lobster that's served in some kind of a sauce. It's
okay.
a hot dish.
Yeah, I'm not a
But
seafood
it
eater.
was freaking lobster at a wedding of
Right.
300
True.
people. You know what I mean? It was like, have you ever gone to a wedding that they had lobster anything?
Yeah, I got, yeah, if that, yeah.
But
Anyway.
the point being that there are so many of us that when something happens, we only can see the
What
bad
you don't
part,
have, what you didn't get instead
you
of
know,
what you did get.
or any good part. I
Yeah.
got a good parking spot. That was good.
Right. Right. It's like I'm only 2 cars in. That might have been the saving grace at the end of the night.
Hmm.
Um, so I want to address like skepticism, right? So in the world where evidence based, and I'm in public health, and like one of the main themes is like empirical data, right? Evidence based information. So in this space where evidence based medicine or treatments are the norm, and also like given that like honestly like there's constant learning in the medical field. So like something might be the norm now, and then we find out years later that maybe it should have happened a different way. So I do want to just acknowledge that. That being said, where this movement of evidence-based being the norm, whether it be from, well, it's usually from studies, right? Um, I'm sure there's skepticism around practice, medical intuition or medical intuitive practices. So, how do you address it, and what do you say to those who are curious but hesitant?
Nothing, because they don't come to me. Or they might sit there and say, I've never done this before, but I've heard,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, and, they'll try it out. I mean, they're not my clients for life. They can come and try it. And if they feel like they're getting answers and they're moving
Yeah.
forward, great and fine. I mean, doing this kind of work, on my end, it's very subjective. On the recipient's end, it's very subjective. It's like, them doing studies on seeing ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, lots of people have seen ghosts, but,
People love those shows. People, they're still coming on, so people watch it. They want to know.
but there's not the tools per se to measure that kind of activity. I mean, I think from a medical intuitive point of view, if you sit there and you start talking about someone and, they're going, okay, yeah, 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 or you identify something that's going on in their body, and it does turn out to be like that's what's going on in their body.
Yeah.
I was being interviewed by, it was like Channel 5 in
Mhm.
Dallas. Anyway, this was years ago. So I do the interview and I'm talking to the reporter, and we're just sitting at my desk in my office, and we're just chit chatting. And he goes, "Well, what about me?" And I had been kind of scoping him out before we got in there, just in case.
Right.
And, so I kind of did this and did a quick scan just to verify what I had felt. And I said, well, there's something going on. And I point to his knee, and actually I touch his knee. I go, like, right there. I go, there's a tension in the muscle, like you broke it, or, something, but it's more muscular and not bone, and blah, 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 blah. So I'm going on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think anything about it because I'm thinking we're just chit chatting. Well,
Mm-hmm.
apparently they were filming. So then the news comes on that this is being aired on. So this is Channel 5 News.
Mm-hmm.
And I sit there and talk about his leg. And then they cut into this guy was having surgery on his leg in the exact same spot that I was talking about.
Mm-hmm. I did watch that interview, and this is why I'm asking like about the skeptics, because he also said like they had, I think they had done a previous report, and you said like you did your research on him, the previous report of him talking about his surgery or something, or getting that surgery. So how do you kind of move past that part, because because I got the sense that he was skeptical. He's like, because but this was public information, like so how do you move past that
Well,
part?
he actually called me and asked me if I watched the news, but at the time I was like so
Mm-hmm.
not political. I never watched the news ever.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, oh, okay. So I think that's why they went with that piece because I was shocked. When
Mm,
I saw that thing, I was shocked. Uh,
mhm. Yeah.
you know,
Um,
but
so
hey, let me respond to that. So when I work with people, it's like I want to know what your symptoms are,
yeah.
and that's really it. Um, and I'm going to kind of take this into a different arena. So I, in my past, have done ghost hunting, and I go in as the intuitive, as part of the ghost, and the other people are taking pictures and doing
Mm,
all that other stuff,
mm,
and I just am like walking around. But when we go, usually the homeowner will kind of tell the group, what's been going on and what kind of things have been happening in the house and blah, blah, blah. And when that's going on, I will literally go in another room. I'll go step outside the house because I
mhm, mhm.
because I don't want to be contaminated by what they're
They're
saying.
saying, right.
So then when I come in, I'm like, okay, there's like this thing over here, and they're, and that was one of the big complaints was this thing over here. When I'm working with clients on their health in particular, it's easier if they tell me what their symptoms are because we have a lot of moving parts. you
Yeah.
know, and when we're in session, we only have finite time. And so
Mm,
if you tell me, well, I have this stuff thing going on with my stomach, then I can just like focus on your stomach. Versus, I've had people that have been skeptics and they're like, well, you should tell me. But then I have to go into, okay, I'm going to give you a physical and I'm going to start at the top of your head and I'm going to work my way through every organ and gland and blah, 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 which takes about an hour. So that's
mhm.
already a lot of time. But if you have Epstein-Barr, that doesn't show up on a generic physical. Now, if you tell me you have Epstein-Barr, then I can sit, or you think you might have Epstein-Barr, I can go in your body and confirm or deny or
Mhm.
make recommendations. I mean, I've had people that have come and they don't really, they're told they have arthritis.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at their body and I'm like, you don't have arthritis. And I finally have gotten to the point that I understand the pattern that I see. They have
Mhm.
Lyme's disease.
What Lyme you said?
Lyme's disease,
Lyme disease. Okay.
because Lyme's disease sits in the joint, but it
Mhm.
doesn't sit in the joint the same way that arthritis does.
Right. 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 Right.
And so, I mean, some of it is from doing this for so long, you
Yeah.
know.
Can you share an example, maybe, where medical intuition led through a breakthrough that traditional medicine had not uncovered?
Want to learn key insights in public health? Download my free ebook, 10 Points in Public Health, at deidresully.com. Discover practical tips and strategies you can use right away to improve public health for yourself and those around you. It's free, it's packed with valuable information, and it's waiting for you now.
In your practice
In my practice.
or in your field, like if there is some like kind of widely known in
Well,
your.
there's not anything that anyone's doing on a scientific level with it
Mm,
at all, which is sad. Um, so this is one of my miracle stories. I love sharing this story with people, and it kind of covers a lot of what we talked about throughout this interview. So I had a client come to me, and she had been to her doctor and was diagnosed with uterine fibroids. And the fibroids at that point in time had started bleeding, which was what prompted her to go to the doctor. And she wanted to know if there was anything she could do. So we had a discussion about what she could do holistically about the fibroids. But I looked at her straight in the face and said, but you have like a 6 month window, but really more like a 3 month window to like go get the supplements and take them like clockwork and like double dose on them and just be hardcore.
yeah.
So I go, because one, we have to get the bleeding under control and at
Yeah.
least get it backed up enough into your body so that we can address it in a longer term way.
Hmm.
So she heard me and said okay. And then I kind of shifted my focus from inside her body and kind of was feeling into the emotions on her uterus.
Hmm.
And I asked her, I said, "Do you have a boyfriend?" And
Hmm.
she said, "Yeah." And I'm like, looked at her, and things just come out of my mouth sometimes. And I just looked at her and I said, "You need to dump him." And she
Why?
looked at me and I said, and she's like, "Why?" And I said, "Because you want him to love you and give you the kind of love that you give to him. There's this longing, but he is never going to be able to do that for you." And
Hmm.
that's the stress that created the fibroids in the first place.
So you were able to kind of intuit someone who was not in the room or in the office through this examination, because I guess I'm thinking like.
But well, he wasn't there. It was her desire to receive affection back from this man.
Hmm.
He had this very strong desire, like she was giving him everything and she was like, "Please, please touch me," and he wasn't giving her anything back. And
Hmm.
so that's what created this unhealthy vibration
Hmm.
inside her uterus. And I just kind of left it there. I mean, what do you say? Dump
I mean,
them.
thinking like, what about? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, let me just finish the story. So, the session ends. She has her supplement list. I made my dump 'em comment, which I was really embarrassed about, but it did work. It did fit. 6 months later, I'm at a conference and she comes up, gives me this big hug, and goes, "They're gone." And I'm like, "The fibroids?" She goes, "Yeah, and the boyfriend." And I
Mm.
looked at her I go, "Huh?" She goes, "Yep, I never did any of the supplements that you suggested. All I did was get rid of the boyfriend and the fibroids are gone."
So she didn't have any tr- allopathic or conventional medicine intervention.
They just wanted to do a hysterectomy. That's why she came to me. It's a
Yeah.
miracle story.
That's the other thing. Like, and we've talked about in other shows, like kind of getting not kind of, but like getting second opinions. Like when doctors are like, "Oh, we just got to cut it out." Yes, that might need that for some. That may need to be the case, but this is why second opinions are like so crucial because especially that now that there's there for those who do move in that arena with like more conventional medicine, there are so many different avenues to take, with ways that they can address to either reduce or eliminate fibroids. And I'm just using like
Mhm.
that example. Um, so the other piece that I wanted to talk about was like the practical advice, right? So I always like to have a piece of practical information, right? Especially because what we're talking about is kind of like unseen, right? Like hidden information. So like what are some of the practical ways or some simple actionable steps that people can take to start tuning into their own intuition, particularly regarding health?
Okay. So to me, it all starts with our thoughts and emotions. So
Mm-hmm.
if we keep finding ourselves revolving back to the same thought, like when we get upset and or triggered, there's usually a thread that will flow through it. And so usually that's what the disease will sit on. Um, but paying attention to your body, and noticing what your body does. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I have a lot of clients that will notice something and then contact me just to verify,
Yeah.
so that it doesn't get to a really bad place.
Yeah. That reminds me of like so I do some work in sexual and reproductive health, so specifically menstrual health and hygiene. And part of it sometimes like I think like kind of tacking onto what you said, like it is like the just practical knowledge of what your body is doing and what your body is saying. Like we'll know what the average, based on studies, but again we know that we know now that a lot of tools and medical tools, and I'm not talking about physical like tools. I'm talking about surveys, questionnaires, things like that, and things that they use to test levels and whatnot. That they're not always accurate for people who are, built created differently, whether it be
Hmm.
ethnic, racial breakdown. Um, Actually, usually ethnic and racial breakdown and cultural, like they don't. The testing does not take those things into consideration. But what we have is like this average, like to measure ourselves against. So using what's there, like, but really knowing like what your body does, so that when something shifts, you actually can see the shift because you have been in tune with what your own body does. So like using the menstrual health and hygiene example, like when it comes to your cycle, how many days is it? Do you notice when your discharge changes, things like that, so that you are in tune with what's happening. And it really isn't like a guess. But if you then you want to know like the clinical piece, you can go to get the blood draw or the scan, and things like that. But based on what your body is exhibiting, you can kind of figure out what's happening. So I agree with that, like knowing your body.
And I'm going to kind of give the medical profession a little bit of a bad rap here, but they're a little bit into fear porn, and kind of scaring you into compliance. And so this piece is my story. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a big story, but so I'm not a sickly person.
Mm-hmm.
And I changed doctors because mine retired to this woman who I love to death, who gave me the most thorough physical I've ever had in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So my thyroid was a little enlarged. I knew my thyroid was enlarged, and I just was not listening to my body and I did nothing about it. How's that? But she said, your thyroid's enlarged. I'd like for you to get an ultrasound. And I'm like, okay, it's an ultrasound. I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
She
Mm-hmm.
sent me and she wasn't there. And the other doctor, just for my convenience, gave me the result of the ultrasound. And she's like, and of course I have to read it, and so she was like, well, there's this thing here, and it says you need a biopsy, and I'm like, I'm not getting a biopsy. She made me sign the paper that I wouldn't do it, that I was going against medical advice. And I
Mm-hmm.
looked at her and I'm like, look, lady, I go, I have an appointment, my annual exam in 6 months. I said, I don't eat salt. In general, I'm not a salt
Either.
person. And
Mm-hmm.
when I use salt, it's, like pink Himalaya salt that has no iodine. And the thyroid needs iodine. and I have not consumed iodized salt in many, 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 many years. And
Mm-hmm.
so my thought was, I probably am having a bit of an iodine deficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go and take me some iodine, and 6 months should be enough time to see some kind of result. And in my mind, and I told her this, but she wasn't hearing me, that if it was the same or worse, I would get the biopsy.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that would be me being extremely reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah, unless they saw something that was where it was dire, like, oh, there's a growth and it's like, yeah,
that pissed me off. I threw the fear porn word at her because it's just like, don't scare me. It's been like this for forever. I mean, like for a long time. So I don't think I'm going to die in six.
yeah. It's funny. I've had a very similar experience, not with my thyroid, but with something else. And it's like, well, we have to cut your face open. And it's like, no, you don't.
No. Well, I
It's
went,
not
I
right.
went, for my next appointment, and my regular doctor lady was there, and she asked me if I got the biopsy, and I was like, and so she goes, well, it's still enlarged. She goes, so you're going to go get another ultrasound, right? And I was like, yes. And then she gives me this look like, and if it's bad, you're going to get the biopsy. She didn't say it out loud. It was so funny. And I'm like, and if it's at the same or worse, I will get the biopsy. I said,
Right.
but I wanted to have a window
Right.
if I could heal myself.
That's it. Right. Right. And yeah, I do agree. I don't think that there is respect for that piece, which leads me to a question. I want to respect your time, so we'll wrap it up. It's the because it kind of goes back to the idea, like how you said, like the other side doesn't really want to touch you guys, and I wondered, if you had any kind of, insight that you'd like to share on, like maybe how studies are done, like maybe if there were more clinical studies that or naturopathic studies that focus on some of these areas, we would have more information.
See, the issue is that there's only subjective information,
Mm-hmm.
really, and not anything that's really, I'm guessing, measurable. I don't know. I've never really done any clinical studies to,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless they can sit there and do it from an observational perspective where someone has a session and they observe the session and the feedback that they get, or, I don't know how that they would do something more clinical.
Yeah.
I think I could come up with something, but I don't know that, like in the clinical world, that they would think that it was a valid study.
Mm-hmm. So, do you think that medical intuition is gaining more traction or recognition?
I do. It's interesting, when we talked about this briefly, as people are watching those ghost shows, they're becoming more open to other thought forms, and on those shows they do have intuitives that show up periodically. So it's taking this concept of looking at the unknown and making it be less taboo, because it was very taboo for
Mm-hmm.
a really long time, and it's just becoming less and less. I mean, I live in Podunk, East Texas, and so to tell people like this is what you do, I mean, I don't really care. But anymore you tell them, oh yeah, well, I do ghost hunting, and they're like, oh really? Is there any place good around here? And it's just a totally different mindset than
Yeah.
20 years ago,
Yeah.
and so people are more open to that side of the world now.
I see. So, where do you see the field going in the next few years?
I mean, I hope, my hope is that they would incorporate, this kind of work in the hospital. I think where it would be a perfect uh, fit would be like in the ER,
Mm-hmm.
where you had somebody come in and you could give some very vast information, you
Mm-hmm.
know, maybe not real specific, but just some very quick insights about what's going on.
Yeah.
Not like about, x-rays and blood pressure, whatever, but if there's something deeper going on. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
I have worked with a couple of naturopaths, like with them about a client, because usually where they really get hung up is if they can't find anything. They can't find anything. They can't find anything. Their blood work is good. All the functional medicine testing is good, but they still have these complaints. And where I think the medical intuition, in my opinion, really comes to play is helping to connect that mind body experience
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Is I mean, I think psychotherapy and counseling is great, but if you can't make the connection of, you know, that guy that dumped you when you were 19 years old is sitting underneath, your heart issue, uh,
Mm-hmm.
how
Yeah.
are they ever going to, heal that?
Mm-hmm. So how do you see it? So last question. How do you see it evolving within the broader context of holistic health?
I feel like in the alternative health field, it's becoming more and more. I mean, I think it was already accepted before.
Mm-hmm.
There it is an expanding field. Um, you know, there are places where you can get certifications now. Like I offer a certification training,
Okay.
that people can take to become a medical intuitive. So there, not that it's regulated, but at least you can go get training and,
Mm-hmm.
be able to work with people on a deeper level and know that there's some credibility versus, like, oh, I took this one weekend class and now I'm a medical intuitive. Kind
Mm-hmm.
of, which,
Mm-hmm. And what's the baseline that the student should have? Like, should they already have some sort of clinical degree?
they do not have to have any degree. I
Okay.
mean, because my training program starts them with learning to work with their own energy. And
Mm-hmm.
then they learn how to do energy medicine. Then they learn how to do intuitive counseling, like intuitive readings, and then the medical intuition. But the medical intuition, they've already learned how to tap into the intuition. And
Mm-hmm.
so the medical intuition module that I offer is really about anatomy and physiology and the
Okay.
beginning of working with herbal medicine and taking what you've already learned and applying it to the physical body.
Got it. Would it be even if there's no like prerequisite? That's the word I was looking for before, like
Uh-huh.
prerequisite for it. Would it at least be helpful, like if people already come in with like maybe they're a nutritionist or an herbalist or
Oh,
some.
that makes you just pop, because you already have this whole basis. The training, and my training is very comprehensive, so that when you leave, you feel comfortable working with people because I make you do like a million freaking exercises.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for the layperson, but someone that comes in as a naturopath or, I've had a number of nurses come and take the training. Those are the best because they already have a really good grasp of, anatomy and physiology and body function and how to question people and how to do a certain amount of assessment. And, that's one of the things that I lack is that I'm
Yeah.
not a medical doctor, so I don't necessarily have all of those doctor words, and I'm not a pharmacist, so I don't, they're more exposed to like prescription things, not that I would ever tell one of my clients to take a prescription necessarily, but when they come in, it's like, oh, well, here's the list of medications I'm taking. At least they have a better idea of what they do.
Right. I think like having nurses could be a good thing, like, based on what you said about like, where you see the field or where you would hope to see it. If because nurses are clinicians, so if you have nurses coming in, they could be that bridge between, this form of alternative medicine to the more traditional, like where you have people who might be kind of working with both, if it's helpful for them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Dr. Rita Louise, for joining us. This was very, very informative. At least I learned something new because, like I said, I had never heard about medical intuition or
Well, yeah,
intuitives beforehand. So this is now something that's I got in my knowledge bank. So thank you so much for joining us. What will there might be questions on the comments, so like if there's stuff that I can't answer, like if it's very specific to the medical intuition information, like willfully it's okay, we'll reach out to you and kind of get some of those answers, and we'll definitely put your information in the description box once the podcast is uploaded and live to the channel.
perfect. And can I do one more shameless little plug?
Of course.
Okay. So on Thursday night, I do a live stream that's called Thursday Night Live with Dr. Rita Louise, which is
Mm-hmm.
me. And I open up the show with like 15 minutes of some topic, kind of depends on what I'm feeling that day. And then I open up the lines and people can type in the little chat box, I would like a reading, and they can get a free on-air psychic reading for me.
Okay.
If you've never had a reading before, this would be an opportunity to kind of check it out. Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central. The easiest way to access the show and be able to do the chat part is to go on YouTube. And my YouTube channel is called Just Energy Radio. So that's 3 words, Just Energy Radio.
Okay.
And Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central, hit the live button, and that'll take you to the stream and the chat part.
Okay.
A
So
lot
we'll
of-
sure to put that information into
Okay,
the
perfect.
box. Yeah, for people. All right. Thank you so much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
It was really a pleasure speaking with you, and a very interesting and fascinating topic.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us here at True Health Live. Remember to like, save, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment and send an email if there's a topic if you want to discuss. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at True Health Live. You can also listen on deidresully.com. If there's a topic you'd like to discuss or hear, you can send an email to truehealthlive@gmail.com. See you next time.